Thank you for joining this episode of our webinar series on best practices in digital risk management and cybersecurity. Today's session is focused on the top threats to watch for 2019. Our webinars take place monthly and cover the latest threats, trends, and best practices in digital risk management and cybersecurity. You'll find a listing of live and on-demand events on digitalshadows.com. Before we get started, we've got a few housekeeping rules. Your phones will be muted for the duration of the webcast. To submit a question for our presenters, please type it into the Q&A panel found on the Event Center console. And if you have any issues with audio or video, please email us at info@digitalshadows.com and we'll get that taken care of right away. Joining us today are two experts on this topic. Our first guest speaker is Elvis Chan. He's a supervisory special agent with the San Francisco FBI Cyber Squad. Elvis manages a squad responsible for investigating national security cyber matters. With over 12 years in the Bureau, he is a decorated agent who is recognized within the intelligence community as a cyber terrorism expert. Special Agent Chan was the lead agent on significant cyber investigations and managed joint counterterrorism operations with domestic and foreign law enforcement agencies. Prior to joining the Bureau, Elvis was a process development engineer in the semiconductor industry for 12 years. He holds 2 U.S. patents, presents at many technical and law enforcement symposiums, and published multiple articles in technical journals. Elvis graduated from the University of Washington with degrees in chemical engineering and chemistry. Joining Elvis is Harrison Van Riper, senior analyst at Digital Shadows. Harrison is a cyber threat intelligence analyst with diligent researching methods resulting in strategic cyber threat mitigation. He is experienced in developing relevant, actionable intelligence products for multiple private industry stakeholders. He earned his bachelor's degree in criminal justice and a master's degree in information technology and management. Harrison is fascinated with the crossover between technology and crime and provides Digital Shadows clients with up-to-date threat intelligence. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Elvis Chan. Elvis?
Thank you very much for having me. Once again, my name is Elvis Chan. I'm a supervisory special agent with FBI San Francisco, and I run one of the cyber squads. Today, I'm going to be discussing cyber threats that we anticipate for 2019, and then also some breach prevention tips for you. Because the lawyers make me do this, here's the legal disclaimer. You will find during this webinar that I'm a very opinionated person, and all of the opinions are my own, unless anyone asks me any questions that require the official U.S. government or FBI stance. In those situations, I will provide that. And then also during the briefing, you'll be hearing what the U.S. government stance is on a few topics. So within the U.S. intelligence community, we really look at cyber threats on a continuum. At one end of the continuum are criminal threats. These are all of the financially and non-financially motivated threats that may be impacting a company. And those include things like business email compromise, account takeovers, different types of spear phishing attacks, credit card stealing. So I would say about 60% of the FBI investigations are focused on financially motivated crime. Next on the list is hacktivism. And when I mean hacktivism, I mean some sort of political but non-financially motivated crime. And so you can see below there's a Guy Fawkes mask. So Anonymous, that's a perfect example. Also Occupy, there are Animal Liberation Front, Earth Liberation Front. So I'm all about folks exercising their First Amendment free speech rights, but when you hack into another company or organization's websites, that's illegal, and we will track those people down and put them in jail. Next on the list is espionage, so cyber espionage. All of you work for very upstanding companies because you're here listening to me right now, but there are some less savory companies out there. A lot of them are overseas who are trying to steal your information. So they're trying to steal your intellectual property, they're trying to steal your invoices, your client lists, things like that. And so we have, unfortunately, a very robust program investigating economic espionage within the FBI here in San Francisco. Next is cyber terrorism. So cyber terrorism is when there's hacking on behalf of and sympathy of or at the behest of a terrorist organization like ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Hezbollah. And I think this is the one area where the FBI is actually ahead of the game. If you keep track of the news, you'll know that ISIS has been pushed out of Raqqa in Syria. They're pushed out of Mosul in Iraq. So they really are just trying to hold on to whatever territory they have left. all of their technical folks right now are focused on keeping their covert communications up, trying to figure out how to jam drones from striking at them. So they have not really had a chance to make their hacking brigades any good. And last on the list, but not least, the state-sponsored intrusion. So state-sponsored, foreign states, foreign countries, whose governments or people working for those governments who are trying to hack into different corporate networks as well as military and other US government networks. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. So the top 4 threats that I see for 2019 are listed right here. Identity theft, business email compromise, which you'll hear me abbreviate as BEC, ransomware, and then advanced persistent threats. You'll hear me abbreviate that as APTs, or just think of it as nation state level intrusions. So for identity theft, what we've been seeing happen now is a lot of new account fraud. So that happens when they are using personal information, and they don't just go straight for the credit cards. They'll start utility bills. They'll try to see if they can get a line of credit on mortgages. We've been seeing a lot of that right now because, as you are aware, on the dark web and just on the open web, there's a lot of people's personally identifiable information. And so a lot of bad guys, both domestically and overseas, specifically in Western Africa, Eastern Europe, and Southeast Asia, who want nothing better to do than to try to empty your bank account of money. And the newest thing that we've seen actually in the last year that's been happening in the US is this thing called synthetic identity theft. This is what I personally call the Frankenstein identity theft model, where they will take the name of someone, they will take the social security number of a second person, and then they will take the address or some other information from a third person. So it's all of these disparate account information. They put it together and they'll put in for a line of credit, or they'll put in for a credit card, or they'll put in for something else, and it'll go to one of the credit rating agencies. It'll freak it out and it'll refuse opening an account for them. However, what it does is it does make a little folder for it. So all of the 3 credit rating agencies, now they have this as a record. And so what someone else can do, or the person who used that Frankenstein account, they can go and they can use that to apply for something that doesn't require going to a credit rating agency. They can apply for a Safeway frequent buyer card or a Best Buy card, and then they can actually start using that identity, build up a little bit more of an identity with it, a little bit more, aging experience with it, and then go back and then apply for another line of credit. This time, the credit rating agencies, it'll take a little while because they'll see that there was an actual account that was set up. So you may have a week or 2 of dead time before the credit rating agency realizes this is a bad thing, and the bad guys will already have emptied that account out. So that's one of the big trends that we're seeing is synthetic identity theft. We're still trying to wrap our minds from law enforcement angle of how to combat that a little better. Next on the list is business email compromise. So this is not anything new or super technologically focused. This is where someone crafts an email address, a spear phishing email that looks very convincing and will have someone try to wire money. So there's no links to click, there's no attachments to open. What they're trying to do is just try to get people to convince people to send money. Where we see this a lot is companies who have lots of vendors, they will figure out who their vendors are and then impersonate their vendors. I have a perfect example here. There was a company called Scholar. They're a Nebraska-based commodities trading firm. And what happens was, it was in the trade news that they wanted to get into China. And so everyone at the company knew that their CEO was going to travel to China to look for a company to acquire. And it got out in the trade news, in the commodities industry media, that was going to happen. So while the CEO was in China, their controller got an email, an email from who they thought was their CEO's personal email account. He said that he found a company that he wanted to acquire and that he was going to send the contact information for a KPMG accountant who would provide her with wiring instructions. So sent another email, got in touch with an actual named KPMG account. Unfortunately, the email was not controlled by that KPMG accountant. And over the course of that week, she wired $17.2 million to this account in Shanghai. And unfortunately, on Friday, when they adjudicated the funds, it turns out that it was not the CEO. on his personal email account. It was someone else impersonating the CEO. And then when they went back to that bank in Shanghai, all of the funds were scattered to dozens of other funds. And this easily could have been prevented if they'd had some sort of second factor authentication. So not only do you get an email from the boss, but you pick up the phone and you call him, or you get a fax, or you get a text. I think any form of second authentication would have fixed this. And if you look at the reported losses, they've been growing very quickly. And we estimate over $1 billion in losses. And this is something that could be easily combated if companies just have either second two-factor or multi-factor authentication whenever they do wiring. And here's something that the U.S. government can actually help with. It's called the Financial Fraud Kill Chain. So this is a partnership between us and international financial entities and domestic financial entities, where if you put in a submission to us, we can try to stop the funds. We can try to freeze the funds from moving. And so the way it works is as soon as you realize that you are a victim of a BEC, you need to contact your financial institution and make them aware of it. And then you need to contact U.S. law enforcement. And really what that means is you should go to ic3.gov. There is a submit a complaint form. In that form, you can type up your situation and then all of the wiring information, your SWIFT number, your transaction number, your bank accounts, the recipient bank account, and then we will hopefully be able to take care of it. I want to say our current success rate right now is about 30%, which is better than 0%, which was what it was back in the day. But just so you know, everyone, there are eyeballs looking at every single complaint. And we have a call center in West Virginia, and it's manned 24/7. And so there's always someone looking, because whenever they see someone requesting a financial kill chain, they get on it as quick as possible. So yeah. On this slide, you can see just the types of information that we request in the financial kill chain. Next on the list is ransomware. And so I think this is the year that ransomware probably surpasses business email compromise as being the largest threat domestically. And the reason for that is because it's becoming so much easier. For those of you who aren't familiar, ransomware is where someone, a bad guy, will send you an email, and they'll either get you to click on a link or click on an attachment that'll deploy malicious software that will go and find your data and encrypt the data. And then it will ping back to the bad guys, whether they're in some Eastern European country or Western African country, and they'll know that they have a live one on the hook. They'll send you an email. They'll ask you to pay a ransom, typically a portion of a Bitcoin or up to a Bitcoin is what we usually see. I know a lot of people will just pay the Bitcoin, that's $6,000 or $7,000, just depending on what the exchange rate is. The official FBI stance is do not pay the ransom. And the reason for that, number one, is that you are just emboldening the criminals to continue doing this activity. And number two, you will likely only get the key to your data maybe 1 out of every 4 times. So it's kind of a sucker bet. You're throwing away good money after bad by paying the ransom. You have to remember, these guys, they do not need to have good customer service. Why, when you've already given them a Bitcoin, they can just dump that wallet and then start up a new digital wallet. So there's no reason for them to actually give you the key. So we recommend that you do not pay the ransom. And unfortunately, what this means is that you may have to iterate back to your last good, clean backup. That may be a day ago, that may be a couple of days ago. Typically, we won't, ransomware is usually executed within a couple of days of when it is on the system. So you won't have to iterate further back than like 2 or 3 days at the most. And from the bottom bullet, you can see that we're estimating approximately $5 billion of losses. We still haven't summarized all of the 2017 numbers, but we anticipate a much bigger number heading for 2018. So next on the list is the advanced persistent threat. This is an ongoing threat, and I think people are noticing it more now just because it's been on the news, right? When you see the Russians trying to hack the election in 2016, you see ongoing Chinese spear phishing campaigns that are now being publicized by the social media companies. And these are the top 4 countries that are doing it: China, North Korea, Iran, and Russia. So there are lots of other countries who are doing it, but these are the ones who are the most persistent, who have the most robust programs that are targeting U.S. and U.S. countries as well as other countries, democracies. So what's going on, right? At the end of the day, these state-sponsored actors and contractors and hackers for hire, they're trying to steal U.S. information. They're trying to steal your intellectual property so that they can get a leg up on their own for companies in their own area of responsibility. So why are they doing it, right? So as I mentioned, trying to steal military secrets, trying to do it for economic gain, trying to do it for political gain, and they're in it for the long haul. So they may just be creating future opportunities. They see you as like a middle level manager or a middle level engineer, and they think that, you know, someday you're going to be something big. So they may just want to get onto your devices now, onto your phones, onto your computer networks, and keep track of you to see how you can help them in the future. So I'd really like to focus on this one case study, North Korea. And the reason for that is I think this is one country that will impact a lot of different companies. So in 2016, that's been a couple of years now, the Central Bank of Bangladesh got hacked. There was a vulnerability in the SWIFT remittance service, and the hacker stole approximately $81 million. So if you pull back the curtain a little bit, the bad guys were actually going after $1 billion. And the way it works is all of these third world countries, they hold most of their money in the US Federal Reserve System. So specifically the New York Fed. The Central Bank of Bangladesh employees, they were trying to call the New York Fed because they could see that the hackers were trying to make off with $920 billion. They actually couldn't get through. Obviously, these hacks always happen on a Friday evening. And unfortunately or fortunately, the New York Fed, they keep bankers hours. On Monday morning, they were actually able to call into the main line, get to someone at the New York Fed, and the New York Fed was able to freeze those assets so that they couldn't make off with $1 billion that they'd intended. Later on, we were able to figure out in 2017 that the group that did the SWIFT hack was also linked to the same group that conducted the Sony hack. For those of you who remember, it was this stoner movie called The Interview that had Seth Rogen and James Franco in it. And guess who it was? It was the North Koreans. And we also believe that they were responsible for the WannaCry ransomware that got out into the wild a little bit sooner than I think the North Koreans wanted. And you may be asking, why is another country just trying to do these things to make money? And what I can tell you is that North Korea is only good at two things: making and testing bombs and missiles and hacking. And both of those are very expensive propositions. And their main trade partner in all of this is China. And I will be the first one to tell you, China does not like to get paid in IOUs. So they are a cash poor society, lots of drought and famine going on, but they need to keep these two industries going on. So what they do is they try to hack and steal money so that they can maintain the sort of activity that they have in both the hacking hemisphere as well as in the building missiles, you know, intercontinental ballistic missiles and nuclear bomb testing hemispheres. So how are they doing this? This isn't going to be a surprise to you. It's going to be social engineering, right? So for those of you who watch Mr. Robot or shows like that, hackers aren't trying to hack just the computer networks or the devices. They're really trying to hack the people behind those. Because at the end of the day, people are the vulnerable, squishy parts that are going to be susceptible to these types of attacks. And so there's a very famous cybersecurity expert, Bruce Schneier, right? Users are going to pick dancing pigs over security every single time. And I think this is what we and all of our organizations within the government, as well as you in the private sector, will have to face, is how do we keep people from clicking on these dancing links? So this slide just talks a little bit about social engineering. And I know if you look at the red highlighted bullet, every single one of you has at least a LinkedIn account, probably a Facebook account, maybe an Instagram account. But these are ways that the adversary, whether they be criminals or whether they be nation state actors, they can build up a dossier on you and really use that to make a really well-honed spear phishing email that you will want to click on. So here's our guidance for industry right now. So establish security policies. You think that's a no-brainer, but I know a lot of startup companies, that's the last thing on their mind, is setting up both information security or physical security policies. That really should be one of the first things that you do, because if you have a great idea, the last thing you want is for someone to walk in and steal it. Next is supporting the established security policies. Even if you have policies in place, but your executive management or your management or the employees don't follow the security policies, you might as well not even have those. The next thing that we found is monitoring and analyzing network traffic. Well, I know that it's expensive to log data We recommend that you log at least 90 days worth of data, because at the end of the day, if we don't have server logs or firewall logs or AV logs to look at, then we're not even going to be able to help you. There are not going to be any digital breadcrumbs for us to follow. So assessing vulnerabilities, being able to do internal assessments, having outside vendors come in and do either just assessments or even penetration testing. That's also very useful. And then configuring systems for security. And I know people don't want to spend the money up front, but I guarantee you'll spend 1/10 the money up front that you would after an incident response, because all of those incident response companies and remediation companies, they charge a very large hourly rate. And then last but not least is just continued training for all of your employees, right? This should not be a once a year InfoSec kind of training. This should be an ongoing thing. The good companies that I see, they do monthly spear phishing tests, right, against their own employees, and they offer prizes for the first employee to report it. You get a $5 Starbucks gift card, and then your name will be put in at the end of the year for a new fancy whatever the cool thing is at that time, like a new iPad tablet or a new Samsung Galaxy phone or iPhone or something. Here are some other ones that are a little bit more technical, but good patch management. I know there's a little bit of an art to doing the patch management and software upgrades. Another thing that's a really big deal is lots of offices are BYOD, right? Bring your own device. So having a mobile device action plan, right? Either having mobile device management somehow, or at least having a plan so that people aren't just going willy-nilly from their cell phones onto your corporate networks. And then regular backups, right? So I would say the companies that do the most extensive backup will back up every 7 minutes of their most critical data. I know that's expensive, but I recommend at least daily backups. And if you're very small, then maybe weekly backups. Next is, not only do you have to worry about information security, you have to worry about physical access, right? So I know a lot of stuff is up in the cloud now, but a lot of the dev work that you do are on servers that you have on-prem. And so those are the things you need to be able to focus on, like who has access to those servers on your premises. Next is securing your wireless networks. Like, just so you know, I never use the wireless at Starbucks or Panera Bread or in the hotel, because, you might as well be, to me, it's akin to going to a public bathroom, right? Like you could put all the toilet paper you want on top of the toilet seat and it's gonna not be that good. So never use wireless. You're better off just, using your own cell phone as a Wi-Fi hotspot. User access management. I think I'd already mentioned this briefly, but really that is one of the things. People should only have access to portions of the network where they have a need to know. Like no one needs to have access to everything on the network, because at the end of the day, what you'll get is you'll get leakage from one group to another, and if the adversary figures out, they can go to the less technical employees at your company and get in that way. And then password management, two-factor authentication, right? Two-factor, multi-factor authentication. We use that within the FBI. We're starting to use that within all parts of the government, not just the intelligence community. So this is definitely something else that you should think about. So incident response. This is probably, most of you have never met an FBI agent, and we only come on your most horrible day. So isn't it wonderful that you actually get to listen to me on a pleasant Thursday morning? Wow, actually, whenever this podcast airs. Definitely you should follow your emergency plan. You already had a security policy set up, and you should have an emergency plan. It should be a physical emergency plan. Out here in San Francisco, there have been wildfires to the north of us and to the east of us, right? So people should have evacuation plans for physical security as well as information security. At some point on your incident response plan, you should call your local law enforcement office. And really what that means is your local FBI field office. So wherever you're at, you should figure out who the local office is, give them a call, ask to speak to the cyber supervisor, and they'll put you in touch and say, hey, I'd really like to establish a relationship with the local field office. Can we talk on the phone? Would you actually like to come and meet? Let me know what it's about. And so we're more than happy to take a call. We're more than happy to establish a relationship with all of the companies in our area. So next is preserving the original media, right, as evidence. And if not, then having an image. I know a lot of times there are production servers that you're using that you need to get back online as soon as possible, but if you can at least make a forensic image, or if you don't have the capability, we can roll in, and we have people who are certified to make digital forensic images. Next on the list is doing your own internal analysis, right? So really, you don't want to call the FBI until after your hair is not on fire anymore. You want to at least have quarantined the situation and gotten some logs in place and have some idea of where the badness happened from. And that's probably the best time to call the FBI. Because if you don't have any of your other ducks lined up, we're going to be asking you questions that you're not going to know the answers to. And this will include gathering all of the pertinent log files that you have. As I mentioned, hopefully you'll have 90 days worth of logs so that we can figure out when the intrusion happened. And a lot of times you'll be able to contact your ISP and they'll be able to get you additional internet, web-related logs. And then conduct a damage assessment. The federal statute requires about at least $5,000 worth of damage, which is pretty easy. That doesn't guarantee that the FBI is going to open a case, but at least we can have a conversation with you to see if we should open a case or not. So here is my myth busting slide, and this will show you exactly what we do not do. We are not going to take over your systems. You've just been the victim of some sort of security breach, so we're not going to roll in our raid jackets, carrying our semi-automatic rifles and pull servers out of your company. We're not going to do that. We're also not here to fix your systems, right? That's why you have your own incident response company on retainer. That's why you have your internal information security folks. Our job is to find out who the bad guy is and catch them before they try to hack you again or hack other companies. We're not going to share your proprietary information with any of your competitors. So I think that's one of the big worries that companies have, is that this will leak to the press somehow and then everyone else will know that they've been hacked. I think what we've seen recently with all the big hacks, Equifax, Facebook, most recently Marriott, is, I guess the good or bad thing about GDPR, the EU's general data privacy regulation, is that people need to disclose that they've been hacked, right? Within a certain amount of time after they found out. And so you should not feel shame in having been breached. Every company has been breached or will be breached at some point. And so I think what is the good thing to have is from all of the prevention guidance that I've provided. If you do all of that right, then you will be resilient and you'll be able to bounce back quicker from a breach. The last thing we're not going to do is share any investigation related information to the media or to your shareholders. Just so you're aware, it is a very big deal when the FBI has an investigation open. We can get fired if we share information from an investigation. We can get thrown in jail. Most recently, what happened was our deputy director, I think if you guys saw in the news, he was fired 2 days before he was eligible to get his retirement pension. So it is a very big deal within the FBI to maintain confidentiality on active investigations. So these are the things that we can do for you. I think I've already mentioned, like, we have 56 field offices spread around the United States. We have over 72 legal attaches, actual FBI agents who are co-located in U.S. embassies around the world. We have lots of technical experience and investigative experience. Investigations tend to be pretty long running, between a year, 3, 4, 5 years, depending on what the scope and situation is. There's a regional computer forensics lab here in the San Francisco area. There are regional forensics labs, FBI labs, that are all spread out across the United States. And these computer forensics labs are actually to help the local law enforcement agencies in your area. So what we do is we provide equipment, we provide training to all of these different local law enforcement agencies. The other thing that we have that the private sector companies don't have is we can bring the full bear of the U.S. government. So we have access to the entire intelligence community, all 17 agencies worth of classified information. We can figure out if any information from your breach is informed by something that we've previously seen before. And so here's a nice slide for me to end on. These are just websites that I recommend that you have on your bookmark. And if there aren't any other questions, then I'm going to hand it over.
All right, thanks a lot, Elvis. So yeah, I'm Harrison Van Riper. I'm a senior analyst here at Digital Shadows, and we kind of wanted to provide our forecasting for 2019. So that's what this next presentation is going to be about. So yeah, so looking forward into 2019, as 2018 kind of comes to a close, we wanted to take a look back at some of the big trends that happened within the digital risk space and forecast out a bit into the next year. This slide just kind of shows really a fraction of the news stories throughout 2018. 2018 was filled with a ton of different big headlines between the Samsung ransomware attacks, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, Russian GRU indictments. All of these stories alone would be worth a single webinar, but I'm definitely not going to go and try and wrap everything up into this one. But we've put together kind of the top 5 trends affecting the digital risk landscape, which companies should keep an eye on in 2019. So yeah, so the first forecast that we have, data breaches and fines will continue as businesses struggle to manage their online exposure. You know, kind of nation state activity often gets big headlines and can dominate a news cycle with news of some new hack or an intrusion, providing them access to private company information. But more often, what we see at Digital Shadows is businesses inadvertently leaving their privately held data openly accessible online. Businesses don't exist within a bubble. I think we all kind of realize that. They have all kinds of external resources and supply chain interactions that occur outside the normal business enterprise network. These supply chain companies might not be as security conscious as the main organization, where they're, you know, where are they putting the data that you send to them? Is it secured? How secured? What's the plan if it gets stolen? How important is the data? The same can be said for internal employees. Even though the main business enterprise network is secure, we live in a connected world where everyone, you know, doesn't keep their files or notes kind of in one place. They're all kind of scattered around. We have network storage devices, cloud storage, remotely accessible business storage. Again, all of these are vulnerable to potential leaking online if they're not stored properly. And you know, you can see more of this research that we've done previously in our Too Much Information paper, which can be found at our website, resources.digitalshadows.com, and also on our podcast that we covered the same information. So all of this data leakage talk is kind of leading me into GDPR and our first forecast. So GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation Act, which is the EU's attempt to take action against organizations which are deemed to be putting their privately held personal data for their customers or their employees at risk. It's now in full effect. So as you can see by my great pictures here, 2017 was the first year to freak out about GDPR. 2018 was the year that GDPR came to fruition and came into effect. And you know, 2019 we think will be about the fines. Even though GDPR was effective in May, the first actual fine was not given out until November of 2018 to a German company who created and operates a popular chat platform, Noodles. So Noodles got in trouble because they were storing username, passwords, email addresses, and names of their users in plain text. No hashing, no encryption, nothing. So that's kind of an obvious no-no. The company and the regulators took notice when the database was posted on sharing sites such as Pastebin, and Digital Shadows actually detected this as well when it was posted on Pastebin, as you can see by this redacted screenshot here. So Noodles was reportedly very open with the regulators and forthcoming with the investigators, and that helped to reduce their fine to about 20,000 euros. So that's kind of an important thing to keep in mind for the future. So these leaks or breaches really can be costly to companies in 3 main ways. They can cause reputational damage, will customers or even third parties, businesses continue trusting you with their data. There's financial loss at risk. So will the company lose revenue from a loss in clientele? And then obviously regulatory actions against them, which with GDPR also has a financial component. So this stuff is obviously very important. So moving on to our second forecast. So you know how I just said that nation state activity, it wasn't always nation state activity? Well, sometimes it is. So due to the ongoing trade disputes between the United States and China, we believe cyber espionage conducted between the 2 countries are going to continue and potentially increase throughout 2019. So throughout 2018, both sides have gone back and forth issuing tariffs on specific goods imported by the respective country. The most recent update was that there's been a tentative truce called, but for how long, we're not really sure how long that will last for. In the meantime, there's no rules against the two countries hitting each other in different ways other than tariffs. Also, throughout the year, the U.S. government has used U.S. CERT to highlight the cyber activity of other nation states that they were at odds with politically. So Russian cyber threat actors were called out multiple times, and so were North Korea, two countries at the forefront of U.S.-related geopolitics in 2018. However, outside the indictments, there hasn't been the same kind of finger-pointing towards Chinese activity. It's reasonable to think that the U.S. may use a similar tactic to call out Chinese cyber threats against the country. So in October, the U.S. Department of Justice released two different indictments for Chinese intelligence officials who were charged with gaining access to computer networks and systems belonging to U.S. companies, specifically calling out those affecting the aviation industry. Their main goal was to steal precious intellectual property from these companies and use it for the betterment of the Chinese economy. So these types of indictments can be used to send a message to foreign threat actors, even though they may not face their charges officially here in the U.S. However, I call these out, specifically the one on the left, because it's pretty unique. So the indictment from October 10th stated that the U.S. had actually extradited a Chinese intelligence official who was charged, luring him to Belgium and then exporting him from there. And this was the first time that a Chinese intel official has been extradited to the U.S. ever, which is a pretty bold move from the U.S. and not likely to aid the relationship between the two countries. One other thing that I wanted to add in is just recently the CFO of Huawei, a Chinese telecom company, was arrested in Canada and is facing extradition to the U.S. due to apparent violations of U.S. sanctions. And so we'll see how this all plays out in the future, but the relationship is strained, I'd say, to say the least. So moving on to forecast number 3. So we have the infamous Emotet malware. So we believe that following the breakout year that Emotet experienced, the downloader, formerly known as a banking Trojan, will undergo further evolutions and start being used for some new types of attacks. So Emotet had a busy year, not just being a massive thorn in the side of financial institutions and customers, but targeting new verticals and geographies. Most recently, the malware added a new email content harvesting capability, which opens up the possibility of more legitimate-looking spear phishing attacks to gain initial access to networks and systems, or it can just plainly function as a information-gathering malware. So yeah, as I mentioned, the malware has been primarily used in the latter half of the year as a downloader for additional malware like ICE-ID and TrickBot, rather than a straight banking Trojan. The capabilities included within the base downloader and its ability to download new modules for different types of attacks make it really attractive for criminals. Therefore, we think that attacks using Emotet are going to continue throughout 2019 and will most likely continue to evolve. So forecast number 4, MITRE ATT&CK framework to flourish in 2019. And I love the MITRE ATT&CK framework. I remember initially kind of discovering ATT&CK way back in like 2015, I want to say. So a little bit of an attack hipster, but yeah, I had no idea how to use it, but I'm not alone kind of in my admiration for ATT&CK. Digital Shadows has been publishing blogs and using the framework in different ways of throughout the things that we do, specifically outlining the tactics used by the Russian GRU as well as those used by Fin7. We think that others in the industry will also recognize the great assets, the great asset and strength behind the framework, and it will be adopted as kind of a non-official industry standard in 2019. So this is just kind of an overview of what MITRE ATT&CK looks like. This is the enterprise version. There's a pre-attack that discusses more of the pre-planning phases of the framework and different kind of intrusion vectors, but it's pretty interesting and pretty useful. These are examples actually of, again, the blogs that I was mentioning. On the left, you have the kind of chart that we've put together for the MITRE ATT&CK framework and related to the Mueller GRU indictment. And basically what that indictment provided to Digital Shadows was that we could see specifically how threat actors carried out their attacks. And so what we've done is actually map that specifically to MITRE ATT&CK. On the right is just one specific example from our blog on Fin7 where we did the similar kind of a thing. And so, yes, in 2018, we've reached peak attack. So this trend graph shows the last 2 years of Google searches for MITRE ATT&CK worldwide. Q4 2018 was the peak, and to go along with it, MITRE released an update to their attack website, which I encourage everybody to go check out. It's great stuff. It's very useful. So forecast number 5, and it's positive news, which is great. So 2017 and 2018 were likely the apex of traditional ransomware attacks. So as you can see on this slide, Bad Rabbit, WannaCry, and NotPetya, all attacks in 2017 really brought ransomware to the forefront in the minds of cyber criminals and the mainstream consumers alike. The latter half of the year into the first half of 2018, there was a spike of ransomware attacks, newly developed variants, updates to existing variants, and so on, which you can kind of see here. However, throughout the year, detections of new ransomware began to drop off significantly. But why? You know, that's kind of the question that we're always asking at DS at Digital Shadows is why are these things changing? And so one of the things that we noticed was ransomware attacks became more sophisticated and targeted with variants like GanCrab and SamSam. But there was another contender that came into the fight for your cryptocurrency. And so that brings us to crypto mining. So cryptocurrency miners came into the scene this year in a big way after the extreme highs observed in the cryptocurrency market in January of 2018. Bitcoin prices spiked to nearly $19,000. This made criminals really rethink how they could get their hands on cryptocurrency, and some turned to ransomware while others turned to cryptocurrency mining malware. And so just give on this slide here just kind of a comparison between the methods for gaining cryptocurrency between these two specific tactics. So really, if you look at this, the difference is night and day, and it's easy to see why crypto miners would be a criminal's choice over ransomware. Ransomware is designed to be loud and noticeable on an attack system. This is how the user knows that there's something wrong and gets the user to pay up. Cryptocurrency miners remain stealthy and silent, harvesting the resources. They don't want anybody to know that they're there. As you can see on the slide, there's so many more potential points of failure that can come into play with ransomware. And the average criminal is more likely to play the numbers game in terms of infection volume and potential for success, so they likely rather stick with a crypto mining malware. So ransomware infections have also likely gone down as an awareness of the threat and defenses have gone up. All of this is not to say that ransomware is going to go away by any means, but we will believe that traditionally delivered ransomware will continue to decline in 2019. One of the main mitigation strategies that we like to preach and kind of believe in is having a ransomware playbook. And Elvis gave a couple of really good examples on that. But what I mean by that is knowing exactly what to do in a situation like this. Who actually responds to a ransomware incident? Do they have the tools and resources necessary to mitigate the issue? Are there backups? Do you know where the backups are? Are you going to pay the ransom or not? There's a lot of questions, and during an attack is not the ideal time to be thinking about those answers. So a couple of key takeaways that I'll share. GDPR is here, and the fines will come into full force in 2019. Cooperation with the GDPR process could net you kind of a reduced fine, as we saw with the example earlier. A defense in depth strategy can really help mitigate attacks and make it more difficult for attackers to carry out their goals, which is ideal in that situation, because if they're in your network, if they're in your system, you want to make it as difficult as possible for them. Using threat intelligence to keep updated on different malware trends, their tactics, techniques, what's popular, what's successful. This is really key to matching the adversary's attacks with proper defenses. And then finally, ransomware is not going to go away, but keep your eyes peeled, but have a playbook, have a plan in place to respond to that. So we'll kind of wrap it up here with a couple of plugs from me. If you found this really interesting and want to learn more about Digital Shadows and a lot of the awesome stuff that we do here, You can get our weekly intelligence summary delivered straight to your inbox by signing up on our website, digitalshadows.com. If you're a podcast listener, be sure to check out our Shadow Talk podcast, where you can hear more discussions around the top cybersecurity news. I'm on there quite a few times, so you can hear my lovely voice again. Just recently, we launched Test Drive, which is where you can get a good understanding of our Searchlight platform and see how Digital Shadows helps our clients to identify their digital risk pain points. It's super easy to sign up. Just visit our website for more information. And that's this. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Harrison, and thanks, Elvis, for those presentations. We had a few questions come in. The first one is, we're a global company headquartered in the U.S. If we experience an attack abroad, should we still notify the FBI? And how would we go about doing that? Do you want to take that one, Elvis?
Yes, that's definitely a great question, Jeff. So I think I mentioned previously in our slide deck, we have legal attaches in over 70 countries. And just the attaches are at the embassy, but they cover all of the surrounding countries where we don't have legal attaches. And so if they're headquartered in the US, they should just, whatever city their headquarters is in, they can just feel free to reach out to that local field office. So whether they're in Washington, D.C. or New York City, Los Angeles, if they reach out to the local field office and ask to talk with the cyber squad or to ask to talk with the cyber supervisor, they'll be put in touch, and then we can manage it. A lot of times the breach will have occurred overseas, and you'll know the reason we have legal attaches in all of these other countries is so that we can work jointly with our FBI counterparts in all of these other countries. So we're very used to running joint investigations overseas with other countries. And at the end of the day, we want to all catch the bad guy wherever they may be.
Great. Thanks, Elvis. The next question that came in, if we're attacked by ransomware, what can Digital Shadows do to help?
Sure. So, if you're attacked by ransomware, you're likely to get a ransom note, which has a Bitcoin wallet address included typically. And so, what we can do here at Digital Shadows is investigate the Bitcoin address. If you know which variant it is, we can, look more deeply into that. Sometimes we can just kind of give you some more context around what kind of a ransomware it is, or who the actors are that are sending that information, whether or not they're legit, whether or not you're likely to get a decryption key. Things like this are kind of typical investigations that we'll conduct.
Great, thanks, Harrison. The next question: why should I call the FBI? That's a pretty broad one, Elvis.
I actually get that question all the time. So I think it's a good question because there's no federal statute that mandates you call the FBI when you've suffered a security incident. So there are two reasons to call the FBI. Number one is that, at the end of the day, you've been hacked, and you may be working with an incident response company, and they have like a library of indicators of compromise. So that's unclassified that they've got. What we have is we have the library of the entire U.S. intelligence community's indicators of compromise. So not only from FBI investigations, but from all of the other three-letter agencies that work in the U.S. government's intel community, we have access to all of that. And so if we see a breach that shows up in some other investigation or some other operation, and we can connect it to yours, then we can usually provide back indicators of compromise to help you clean up your platform even more. That's the first reason you should contact us. The second reason is whatever country you're in, whether you're in the US or the EU or somewhere else, there are going to be regulators who are going to be interested in talking to you, right? Because you just had a security incident, maybe a lot of data got stolen or leaked out. One of the first questions regulators always ask is, did you contact law enforcement? And if the answer is no, they're going to wonder, I wonder why they didn't contact law enforcement. Did they have something else to hide? And the digging will be much deeper than you would otherwise want it. But if you're transparent and you were breached and it was through some accident or it was through no fault of your own, there should be no issue calling law enforcement. Because at the end of the day, at the very least, we'll have a conversation with you. And at the very most, we can open an investigation to figure out who hacked you.
Thanks, Elvis. And the last question that came in, how can Digital Shadows help to identify our email compromise risk? That one's for you, Harrison.
Yeah, sure. So I think what Digital Shadows really does well is monitors externally companies' digital footprints. So essentially what would happen is we monitor for your email domains, and we can basically detect when they pop up in publicly released breaches, or we have integrations with Have I Been Pwned. We'll see when they come into their platform and then alert you to that. So essentially what we're trying to do is prevent any sort of email account takeover or business email compromise by knowing that those accounts have been compromised within a breach. Then that's kind of the main way that we would prevent against that.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Harrison and Elvis, for the great presentations and helping to prepare our audience for 2019. And to that end, if you'd like to test drive the Digital Shadows platform, please don't hesitate to visit us at digitalshadows.com, and we'll get you signed up right away. And please watch your inboxes for an invite to our next webinar on best practices in digital risk management and cybersecurity. Have a great day.